When I arrived here, I would say it's so difficult for a person to take this decision to study abroad or to live abroad, especially when you're older. You have a family, you have your stuff in your country, you have a house. But when I arrived here, the first day at the airport, it was so interesting. There is a group of people with signs and welcome Denise, so we are here. So people from Tupperware, people from here. And this kind of reception was quite good for me. So in this almost 3 months that I have been here, I've learned lots of different things that from what we have in Brazil, and especially related to social inclusion and social entrepreneurship issues, which I didn't have any kind of contact because of my profession there. I improved them a lot. So I took part in some classes, graduation classes and undergrad classes also, and be in contact with young people too. So it's so interesting to learn from them what kind of interests they have, what kind of volunteer services they do. So it's so interesting to be in contact with them, with the students. I think the best experience that I had here, at least until now, is becoming a student. I have been teaching for the last 33 years. It was so important for me to be in a different position inside class. And I think especially here, we have a beautiful campus, lovely students, and different kinds of issues being taught. So I think it was so important for me to be a student again. Dr. Conaway, Professor Mesbah, Gianna, Carolina. So we have a group now, we have a team, and it's so important for me to be supported by this team. So sometimes we discuss different things, different issues related to economy, different issues related to education. I am so excited to continue the program.
It is such an honor to be here with you today to discuss with you something that is near and dear to my heart, and that is global links. I want to also have a little shout out. You might notice in your program that the moderator is to be Eleanor Steele, and Eleanor could not be with us today, so I just want to send some love to her, because these panels are also being simulcasted, so there were some folks who are outside of the room who are also following along, and so I know Eleanor is, so I want to just say hello to her and send her lots of love. Because she, like Rick Goings, are important founders for Global Links program. And I think it's a beautiful transition, right? You just heard some really big challenges, and you heard some really big initiatives, and maybe some of you in the room are wondering, well, what do I do, right? How do I take a step? How do I, more than lean in, right? How do I jump in? How do I get involved? And so we're gonna talk about that a little bit today. So before I get started, I want to take a minute just to tell you what a Global Links is, and then I'm going to introduce the two folks who are on the stage with me, and we'll get together with our conversation for this morning. So you see our infographic there on the screens. So Global Links is a public-private partnership. So exactly what we just heard from Rick and Rachel about the importance of this, we're going to give you kind of an example of that. So the partnership is from Tupperware Brands, from Rollins College in Orlando, Florida, and from the U.S. Department of State, the Office of Global Women's Issues. So it is truly bringing together the important actors. But below that institutional level, there's also the people who are making the work happen. And we are currently having our fourth series, if you will, or our fourth cycle of Global Links. We started in Iraq, as Rick mentioned, and the program itself runs on a 2-year cycle where we train the trainers. So we bring in professors from, female professors from different parts of the world, and they come over to Rollins College for a semester, learn a lot about social entrepreneurship, address some of the ideas of funding and how do I not only think about funding from other institutions, but how I might generate funds myself. Then they return to their home country and train the trainers. So that ripple effect that Rick was talking about, and those trainers involve students, involve youth leaders, like many of whom are in the room. So from Iraq, then we had 2 cycles in India. I'm happy to say this is our 3rd year at Presidential Precinct, sharing the stage, and this year we are in Brazil. So this is my transition to sort of introduce who's sitting on the stage with us. And to my direct left here is Dr. Denise Delboni. She is our current Global Link Scholar in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Dr. Delboni is both a lawyer and a professor and a doctorate, so I'm very humbled to be with her. At the same time, super energized, those of you who got to know Denise in the last day or two. She teaches at 2 universities in Sao Paulo, FGV. I'm going to use their initials because I don't speak Portuguese, so I'll just use the initials, FGV and ESPM. And we are very grateful to them to loaning Denise to us for about 6 months, where she spent in Rollins College, and she returned in July, yes, I think, to Sao Paulo to begin that second stage of that. And so when we started that second stage, we brought on Luis Fantini, who I have to say we are absolutely excited to have here. He brings the youth, he brings the excitement, not that we're not young, of course, we are young, right? We are very young. So see, he brings the younger youth with the, yeah. Okay, so moving on. So Luis, who brings with us, and I'm gonna read, he is currently in the MBA program, and I just want to get the exact background right for you, Luis. Who is our program assistant in Brazil, and he is in the MBA program at FGV, and he just completed his undergraduate thesis in human resource practices, return on investment, and employee motivation in large corporations. So you can see some of that connection between the human element in the large corporations and in the institutions. And as I said, he's brought a great deal of energy to the work that we are doing in Brazil, and we're really happy to have him on board. And of course, Tupperware Brazil continues to be involved, as does the State Department, both in the US and in Brazil, to create this. So what I want to start with, Denise, if I can, to ask you, thinking about female entrepreneurs in Brazil and the way that Global Links is connecting. What can you tell us that's kind of the challenges that you're having in Brazil and their access to resources, and how Global Links is sort of making that transition available to them?
Great. First, I have to tell you that I feel so young to face this kind of challenges, especially in Brazil. We have 3 big challenges related to this issue, I would say, and they are strong linked. First, we have to say something, unfortunately, about the persistent unemployment rate in Brazil. We have 12% unemployment rate nowadays there, and it leads to another thing. Most part of women, especially those ones without any kind of access to education, they try to run their own businesses. So the second problem is related to small businesses in Brazil. We have a statistic, a very good one, among the entrepreneurs, 52% of them are women in Brazil. But this is the question, they start to run a small business, which, by the way, could deserve good attention from the government, but it doesn't happen this way. I'm saying that because they offer 85% of new jobs every year in Brazil. So, of course, it deserves attention, but the question is that we have changes in government, and it's very difficult to run behind this kind of situation. And then it goes to another situation. So these women inside this kind of small businesses or leading this business, sometimes they are head of their families. It's strange because around 16% of them, they had access to any kind of degree, thinking about formal education. So it's very difficult to deal with this situation because it's not easy to run a small business in Brazil. Imagine being a woman without any kind of qualification. So I think this is the, how can I say, this is, I can say about this kind of big issues in Brazil.
And also, I'd like also to point out that in Brazil, the female entrepreneurs specifically have double shifts. So by the morning, they have their regular jobs, and by the evening, they start doing the things of the enterprise in order to get more money. And also, studies have shown that once they start to get more money, they start financing and help their children to get education. So it's another way to improve education in our communities.
Right. So talk us through a little bit in the work, because what Global Links does is create this kind of ripple. So connecting the students, right, from the universities in Brazil to these female entrepreneurs and kind of combining skill sets So can you talk us through what you've seen so far with that combination? Where are you in pulling that together?
Yes, when I arrived, I returned to Brazil after the program here, I was so enthusiastic about share the words about the program. And it was so interesting because we didn't know how to start that. Well, so we'll have to talk to. So we started to look for other professors. By the way, today is the Professors' Day in Brazil.
Oh.
So congratulations to the professors here, because I think it's a wonderful profession. Believe me, it's a wonderful profession. So we started to share the word about the program among students, among other professors, among different colleges, poor ones, rich ones. So we started to spread the word, and we used the social media to do it. So to have an idea, we had about, I think, 14,000 people seeing the program.
Yeah, we paid Facebook advertisement and to promote the program in Brazil. And with that, we had the reach of 14 people that have seen and have had any type of interaction with the program on Facebook.
Yeah, but we had a challenge because we had to how can I say, to invite the students to come and to join us in order to have this kind of program there. And it was so interesting because in the beginning I thought that the program was to empower female entrepreneurs. But in the end, I can say that this kind of empowerment affected everyone involved in the program. I feel much more empowered nowadays, definitely. It's interesting because you feel that you can do something. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that the students also, because I had some very good conversation with the students who took part in the program, especially in the 2 workshops that we promoted in Brazil. And I was so touched by them, especially at the end of the first workshop. I almost cried there. I was really touched. No, it was so interesting because every day we say bad things about young generations. You know who you are here. We say, no, they are not interested in anything. Oh my God, they are so, they don't believe in anything. So we say bad things, especially inside colleges. And I was touched by one of the students who arrived to me and said, Denise, even if I would not be selected to take part in this program, I have to thank you because at least we can see the things with different eyes. And I was so touched by that. It's interesting because we see young people here talking about problems that you have in your societies. So I think this is a kind of opportunity that the program brought to me, to feel that not only the female entrepreneurs in the end would be empowered, but also the students, also me myself. Even though I'm a lawyer, I was looking for change the world when I decided to look for this kind of profession. So in this situation, the program helped me much more.
Right. So Luis, kind of continuing that thought, as you were recruiting the students to join and to learn more about Global Links and to think about becoming Global Links changemakers, what are some of the things that you heard them saying? What is it that they want to do to become involved in a program like this?
Yeah, I guess we are going to address this topic after, but in Brazil, we're recruiting the students of top universities in São Paulo, basically. And the thing that I most heard about them saying was to give back. So they understand that their reality was different from the entrepreneurs. So they would like and they are willing to make the difference in their communities in this way, to empowering female entrepreneurs and also having success and so on and so forth.
So it's interesting, it connects back a little bit to what Rick and Rachel were talking about, not only in terms of education, but also some empathy.
Yes.
Right, so understanding the situation and then feeling, maybe one could say, a moral obligation, a desire to help and to bring those together. And I think, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like just to add that it was the most takeaway that I got from this program. Like Dr. Delboni said, I'm a student currently, and I've heard many times that my generation is not interested in nothing. And once we started running the program, I saw that there are many students there willing to make the difference. And I was like, it was the highlight of the program for me.
Okay, great. And so Denise, I think you're telling us some unique things about Brazil, right? So we've been in Iraq, we've been in India, now we're in Brazil. Can you, looking forward, think about the economic impact a program like this, like Global Links, might have on Brazil and large, and then on these communities that you're mentioning that the entrepreneurs are coming from? I
think the big opportunity that we have in Brazil is that, of course, you know, the developing countries have this kind of situation related to incomes. And especially in Brazil, we have top universities, top colleges there, 2 of them or 3 of them, they send most part of students to take care of this kind of issue in Brazil. And it was a surprise for us because we were waiting for poor students coming from low classes, going to take part in the program, and it was the opposite. So I think this is the great part of the program, especially in Brazil, because we can bring the students who, in the beginning, we thought they were so worried about getting good jobs in the bank or looking for their financial accounts or multiply their money. No. They are looking for being engaged in social classes. And especially seeing this situation in Brazil, I was so surprised. So we are trying to mix low-income female entrepreneurs with this guy, they went to the top colleges there, so their families are so rich, and we are trying to put them together. So let's see what's going to be the result. I'm so curious about that, because they have different kinds of views related to society. Some of them, they don't know the other's words, so we are going to put them together.
And I also would like to add that as a difference in this fourth edition of the program, we were able to, at the workshop phase, bring professors and volunteers to teach subjects that are relevant to entrepreneurs. So we train the students to have like marketing, social media, accounting, finance, tax, so they are more qualified to help the entrepreneurs.
I think this is a really important point, because what is the difference between social entrepreneurship and some of the other ways that we become involved in our communities through advocacy, through donations? And what's important here is exactly what you're saying, is that each of the parties are bringing assets, are bringing knowledge, right? So students who have this formal training and this additional training for being, thinking about being part of this program. And then you have the female entrepreneurs who have really been living this reality, right? And they've thought through, how do I make this happen? And what we've seen in India and in Iraq is when you bring those two worlds together and you share that learning across, we have seen growth. So I'm taking out my lens into the future and hoping we see also in Brazil, what we've seen in Iraq and India is an increase in the business, right? So the women entrepreneurs who have been involved have seen an increase in their sales, more sustainability. We've also seen an increase in their self-confidence, right? Which we know, and Rick mentioned the importance of all of us increasing our self-confidence so that we feel qualified to continue with the work that we're doing. And the third thing is kind of an environmental and social awareness. So in India in particular, we spoke a lot with women of what happens with your scraps, right? And what are you doing with the runoff from your water when you're dyeing those beautiful saris? And having the students generate really creative ideas. We've seen growth across those. We've seen a decrease in child employment at some of the schools. We've seen women who have come back to work. We had a female entrepreneur who fired some women as they got married, and then she said, okay, you're married, so you're not coming back. And it was the students who said, why are you doing that? Right? I'm a young woman. I hope to get married someday, but I hope to continue to work. So having these conversations by bringing these two worlds together, right, has been really exciting. So where are you exactly right now in the process of what we call phase 2 to phase 3? Where are you guys now?
So we had around 207 applications.
Can I go?
We'd like to talk about numbers.
Yeah. We had
learn by heart. This is an ability for young people. Younger.
Yeah. We had 270 applications of students that were willing to be part of the program. Then the second phase were the seminars, in which we explained the program, the phases, and everything. And the other phase was the seminars. In this phase, we selected only 100 students to be trained in order to be with the entrepreneurs. And now we already selected 35 finalists that will be paired with one entrepreneur.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, and it's so interesting because in this edition, the last editions, we had around 20 companies, 20 small businesses, and one student to each one.
Yeah.
And in this one, we were so pretentious, ambitious, I would say, because we decided to bring 35 students to 35 female companies. And why? The students were so enthusiastic about being part of the project, and we had enough companies to offer to them to learn, because they are going, they are going to learn a lot. And so we decided to bring 35. And at a certain point, Rachel, I'm looking at you, because you mentioned that sometimes we have to we have to start a small proportion. So we have to start small. And at a certain point, we look at that, and I asked Luis, but 35 is not a huge number. We could have more. But sometimes we have to take our ambition and say, okay, no, let's try in this number of students and female entrepreneurs, and then maybe we can have this ripple effect. Because it was so important to know or to feel the market there. And each one of the markets have different kinds of, has different kinds of peculiarities. Yes. So it was so important to feel that. And I remember when we were talking about that, because sometimes you want to start big. We want to start bringing a wonderful effect to our countries and impact. But of course, we're going to measure that, to measure this kind of impact, and after that, maybe we can ripple this effect in Brazil.
So I think what I hear you saying is, if we had more Tupperware brands in the world and more, we could have a bigger ripple effect. You agree?
Definitely, definitely.
It's not the lack of students or the lack of entrepreneurs, right? And so we're bringing back to this idea of looking for and continuing these partners. So what I'd like to do is see if the audience has some questions for you, and then we'll come back and ask you for some closing thoughts. Okay. Is that okay?
Okay, okay.
Any questions that we might have from the audience? Let's start here, and then we'll go over. Sorry, right here. Larissa's bringing you a mic.
Thank you so much for such a great interaction. I really appreciate the discussion. My question goes from the point where you have already trained a couple of entrepreneurs. You have already trained hundreds of students. How do you measure that? How do you measure the impact further on? Like, what I mean to say is, taking a session or a lecture or workshop is one thing, but implementing those learnings is another thing. So are you thinking of, or have you already started a program that kind of supports and mentors the students that you have already trained in your session?
Yeah, our idea is to have the professors who taught those subjects to them available during all the program. So when the students are having any kind of doubt or problem with the entrepreneur there, we'll reach out not only to us, the Global Links team, but also to the professors in order to have like the correct answer and the correct action plan.
And that's why they were invited in the beginning of the program. We had 6 different professors, volunteer professors there, and they will be part of the brief sessions that we are going to have to offer this kind of opportunity to students. And not only the selected students, we are going to invite the others the other part of the almost 100, we are going to invite them to take part in these sessions, because I think it's so important for them to learn about small businesses in Brazil. So it's also an opportunity for them to learn, not only for the female entrepreneurs. And so the briefing sessions, they are previewed. And you were talking about how we can measure the impact. And yesterday we talked about Confucius. And I would like to bring an idea about that. I love this quotation, this Confucius quotation. When you see something, when you listen to something, you forget. When you see something, you will remember. But when you do, you learn. So we are talking about definitely put the students hands-on to be prepared to help female entrepreneurs, but much more than that, to see how the small business world in Brazil is happening and how important it is. As I told you, it offers 85% of new jobs in Brazil. So we're not talking about big companies, we're talking about small businesses and led by women. So I think this is the importance.
And to add kind of another perspective to the answers that you have here is thinking about what has been the impact for the students and the entrepreneurs and even the professors who have been involved in India and Iraq. So in Iraq, we see the professor has actually moved up into her institution and is now leading the institution, and she began a what we would call here in the States a career development center at her university. So preparing the students for the skills, for the interviews, for thinking differently about making a job and not only taking a job and not waiting. In Iraq, the situation was for the government to give them a job, right? What we've seen in India, particularly around the students, is their increased ability. So contrary to what you're saying, where the students have come from in Brazil, in India, the majority of the students came from what I might call middle income colleges, right? So not big universities. And then after they participated in the Global Links program, what they found is they were getting calls for interviews for Deloitte, for some of the big consulting firms, which had never looked at them before. And the reason was the self-confidence that they had gained and their experience in the field. And then I'm happy to say in India, we have, since the program has pivoted to Brazil with the support of Tupperware brands, we have continued to receive some grants. Because people see, so this is the important thing about starting, right? People see what's happening and they go, whoa, how do we keep that momentum going? And so we now have 2 grants that we are running where the students in Kolkata, India are now rippling out beyond Kolkata into the North Bengal region. So we see the momentum start and it continues. And I will say it's not something that happens immediately. It's not a fast, quick fix. Right? It's just like when we try to lose 10 pounds, right? You have to keep at it every day and just keep believing that the progress is happening. So we've seen the growth on all 3 sides. I think we had another question over here, and then maybe we'll have one last question here.
Okay, thank you for the great initiative that you are doing. So I have monitoring and evaluation background, and one of the challenges that I have established in my monitoring and evaluation, which leads to failure of programs, is targeting. When you miss the targeting, like all the efforts are in vain. So I'd like to learn from you how you ensure that you target the right people for the program. My second question is on sustainability. You do this great initiative of training and maybe providing resources, startups for the young entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs. But I'll say, for example, in Africa, part of our culture is to respect the husband. And when you are a female entrepreneur, respecting a husband in a home will mean he has to make decisions, and you take all the income that you are having from your entrepreneurship and give it to the husband so that he can make decisions, which defeats the whole purpose of empowering women with entrepreneurship. So I'd just like to learn from you on what you do, apart from just training and providing maybe resources to ensure that you achieve the outcomes, like continued support for the young entrepreneurs that you train.
Okay, so 2 things to think about. What I want to do is remove the word from your question, just training. Training is never just, right? Training is very, very important. As an educator, as a professor, there is never any only or just or anything that becomes before training, because training is the important start. But as you think about some of the questions, Denise, go.
Yes. First, I'd like to say something about the criteria that you use to approach the female entrepreneurs. About the students, no, because of course they were all interested, or at least the ones who arrived, they were so interested on taking part of that. And we didn't exclude the guys from first years at college, because I think it's so important to bring them aware of the problems, regardless the year that they go to the college. But talking about the female entrepreneurs, and I agree 100% with you, because if we waste any kind of resources with this public, of course we lose the program. And that's why we had the idea to bring some requirements for the entrepreneurs. First, they were supposed to have formal businesses in Brazil. Why? Because I took part in different programs, and when we didn't observe that, and of course we lose the resources, because after a certain time, they were trained to the program, and they gave up. So they entered to a different company, so they gave up, and we're not looking for that. So it was one of the requirements to have a formal company, registered company. And the second one, it would be so important to be close to the students, or at least to downtown, because it was easier for the students to go there and to be with them in the mentoring sessions. So it was so important, this kind of situation. Third, we were looking for sectors like food like services in general. Most part of the women in Brazil work in this kind of sessions, in this kind of sectors. And I think it was so important to help them because we see that they have opportunity. And fourth, in Brazil, we have something around 40% of the families, poor families, are headed by women. And I mean, without men, without husbands. So good for them, because they don't have to listen to the man, right? So they have to go ahead, And this was a very important criteria, not to be divorced or to be abandoned, not such a thing like that. But it was a very important requirement to be sure that she was the responsible for taking decisions in her business. So this is so 100% sure. It's so important to pay attention to that. Otherwise, you can't have this kind of ripple effect.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to add anything, or you?
I guess Dr. Daboni covered all.
Okay,
yeah.
all right. The thing I want to add in terms of, and it goes back to what Rick was saying in terms of he for she, right? And what we definitely observed in India is that once the men started to understand and became involved with what the women were doing, then this defensiveness went down. I mean, you're speaking of the continent of Africa. Look at where we have been working, right? Iraq, India, now Brazil, right? These are also not cultures that are perhaps stereotyped or known to be particularly supportive of women's initiatives. But what we have seen is the men are joining and understanding that together they grow. Mm-hmm. The other thing, for those who are doing multinational programs like this, it's important to know, as the person sitting back, in this case in the States, right, in the headquarters, is to know when to listen to the people on the ground and to give them the freedom to understand that how tweaks or things happen in that country might be different than the way you might manage it from sitting at home. My lovely timekeeper has told me that I don't have time to come to your questions. So may I encourage you to speak with us afterwards? Is that okay? Thank you so much.
Something.
But we're going to close by you telling us your closing remarks. So yes, please add.
No. I would like to tell something to Mark and to Cameron here from Tupperware. We were talking about this kind of importance to bring companies together. And why? Because in developing countries, we have problems related to governments in general, and especially for the last 20 years, we have seen a kind of failure talking about institutions in general. We are talking about family, we are talking about government, we are talking about institutions in general, government. And because of that, the organizations have gained some space among the young people. I would say that if the government gives the first step, it will be so slow and nobody would take too much attention to them. But when a company like Facebook, Google, or another one, a big company, tries to give this first step, every young person takes a look at them. So I think this is the most part important to that. And believe me, I'm so old. I'm talking about young people, but I'm wearing pink today. I'm so old, I'm wearing pink today. Why? Because I'm representing a program here, a Tupperware program here. Even though I am a lawyer, even though I belong to 2 different colleges, I'm not bringing a Brazilian flag. So I think this is the importance related to the companies. We have to be together, otherwise we have to wait for those elephant governments because they move in a very slow way. So I think that's why. This is for Cameron and Mark. They are here, and I have to tell or to thank them, especially because the beauty of this program, we are so involved on that.
Yeah.
Luis, closing words, quick.
Yeah, I'd like just to recall the day that we had yesterday with Rick going. So I would like to say to you all to find yourselves, find what motivates you, embrace it, and make the difference. I was very fortunate to have this path of my own, so I'm passionate about work relations, to empower women, especially entrepreneurship as well. So I'm very happy to be part of this program that gives great insights and also results.
We're super happy to have you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.